Great. Welcome to another session of high yield routines. And this time we're focusing on number talk images. My name is Janice Nowakowski, and I'm the district teacher consultant for mathematics and numeracy from kindergarten to grade 12 in the Richmond School District. And our focus on high yield routines is part of our overall focus on numeracy as part of the district's strategic plan. And part of having numeracy foundations is having mathematical foundations. And mathematical content and competencies can be developed through these high yield routines for students across grade levels. So number talk images are a routine where students share their visualizing strategies and their thinking about a quantity focused image. And that could be a dot image or it could be a photograph. And students respond to the questions, how many and how do you see them? So in this example here, how many ducks? How do you see them? Can you see them a different way? Can you see them another way? How could you record with numbers and symbols how you see them? How could you record with pictures how you see them? And some of that you take on as the role as the teacher facilitator at the board, first with showing how to record, and I'll share some of the examples of that today. But those are some of the extensions in terms of going from the picture or the image to recording symbolically. There's a wonderful website, Number Talk Images, the Weebly site, and it's curated by a math educator named Pierre in Ottawa. And so it's a Canadian website, but math educators from all around the world contribute images to this website. And you can just go there and download them to your desktop and project them to a screen, or you can print them off and have them on tables for students to look at and circle and mark up, etc. So have a look at that website for some ideas. So number talk images are usually divided into two sorts. There's dot images, like you see here on the screen. So dots are in different formats and students think how many dots are there? And then how do you see them? How did you know there were that many? Did you subitize and break it into sort of groups? Did you decompose? Did you use multiplication or addition to think about it? Did you use counting strategies? Etc. And regardless of what grade level I begin number talk images with, I always start with dot images, because the photographic images, sometimes the students get really focused on the ducks or the brownies or the cookies or whatever in the image. And so to get them focused on the routine and learn the routine, I start with dot images. Then there's also the photographic images, and these are two images from the website. So the paints and the brownies. And again, the items are in different orientations to nudge students' thinking, or there might be an array with some pieces missing, and like you can see with the brownies. So how might students use multiplication or adding or subitizing to think about how many colors of paint there are, or how many brownies there are in the pan? So, for example, in a kindergarten in one class, I started with this dot image, and I knew it was an image. If students wanted to count each dot, that could be an access point for those students. But other students in that K-1 class were also able to count by twos, or they saw 2 4s and they weren't quite sure how to deal with that one in the middle. So that nudged their thinking about how many dots there were. So what I did is I copied that image multiple times on my slide and then projected that. And as they shared their thinking about how they saw the 7 dots, I was circling. They're like, well, I saw 4 here and I saw 4 here, but then I knew that one in the middle was an extra one, so I needed to subtract 1. And then for the grade 1s, I recorded the equation underneath to connect that pictorial image with a symbolic notation for what they had expressed. You can see here, I saw 2 and 3 and 2. I saw 2 and 5, and that makes 7. So again, some of the kindergarten students are using that joining or combining language of and. Sometimes they use plus because they've heard that. And then you're connecting that language to the symbolic notation when you have a combined class or when you have students that are interested in that. You can see this student here said I counted by 2s, 2, 4, 6, and 1 more is 7. And so I'm recording their strategies. Sometimes they come up to the board because they want to show me what they're talking about, in case, if I'm not circling the right things. And then I had 6 copies on here, but you can see I've added 2 more quick draws here on the side because they had more strategies that they wanted to share. And then this was the first photographic image we did. So waffle pretzels, and they're like, those are like waffles. And then they realized they were pretzels. And so again, something that I knew, K-1 students could count. So to create that access point for them in terms of counting. And they were focused on the number of pretzels, not the squares within the pretzels. And you can see here along the sides, I've drawn the array of 9, but recorded the different ways the students have seen it. So this student saw 1 + 1 + 1, they counted by ones. This student saw it as vertical 3s. Another student saw it as horizontal 3s. And then again, some students focused on counting by 2s and then the extra 1. And you can see this student here has come up to actually point and show me show how they saw it. Another one, so I projected the image and I just circled with a different color of whiteboard marker for each student and then wrote the corresponding equation in that color off to the side. Here you can sort of see on the side, I don't know if we saw it in a previous one, just like for number talks, they want to tell you how many there are. They're so focused on that at the beginning. And so I just sort of say, okay, 3, 2, 1, call out how many ducks there are, pretzels there are. And you sort of just get that out of the way. And then you can focus on the different visualization strategies and thinking strategies that they're using. But some of the students said there were 11 ducks and some said 12. And so then I reframed it just like in number talks. Okay, so who would like to prove that there are 11 ducks and who would like to prove there's 12? And then as we took the different visualization strategies and recorded them, they were all 11. And so I said, so some of you that thought it was 12, have you changed your thinking, or would you like to prove and justify that you think it's 12? And the couple that had thought it was 12, they're like, no, you're right. Now that I hear that explanation, I know that it's 11, and that makes sense. So having that discussion too, and making a safe space so that students can say, oh yeah, I've changed my thinking about this, because that happens all the time. So this is an example of where I started in a grade 4 and 5 class. So again, very similar to the K-1 class with the overlapping dot in the middle, but larger arrays. And again, the grade 4 and 5 class I was doing this in has been focusing on multiplication. So I wanted to make that connection with arrays. And I asked them to look at it with that particular lens. And again, same thing, I copied it multiple times. And as students shared how they saw the dots, I recorded in symbolic notation and introducing brackets to them as a way to show, again, express really clearly how they communicated their particular strategy. So this student here on the right saw groups of 3. And so she saw that there were 5 3s. And so that was one part of her strategy. So I put that in brackets, and then the extra 2. So that sort of, she knew 5 times 3 was 15, and then extra 2 was counting on to make 17. And then here you can see 2 by 6 arrays here, and then that extra 5 in the middle. And again, here the 3 by 3 plus 3 by 3, subtract 1 kind of thing. So different strategies, same image, and you kind of keep nudging. Does someone have a different way? Does someone have a different way? And see how many different approaches that you can get. Sometimes at the end, I'll just say, okay, let's look at these two ways that students in our class saw the dot image. And how are they the same and how are they different? Just to get that comparative thinking happening in terms of, it might have been the arrays, or it might have been, the extra amount, or even in odd numbers, all sorts of different things come up there. And then we introduced some images. Again, you can see grade 4 and 5, there's larger numbers or quantities that are involved, and that we're making those connections to multiplication and looking for arrays. And some students looked at the whole array to start off with, so 6 by 6, and then subtracted the other pieces. And others saw arrays within there, like you could see 3 times 6 at the top, and then another 2 times 3, and a 1 by 5, and a couple extras. But I'm sure as you're looking at these, you're thinking, oh, there's so many different ways to think about this, and those arrays that are within the 6 by 6 array as well. And then another one, I like to bake. Those are both my baking pictures, the last one and this one. These are financiers. And we asked, well, how many raspberries did I use for this tray of financiers? And so again, all their different strategies, some of them just knew, 3 times 8 is 24. And so solved it that way, or 8 times 3 is 24. And then others use skip counting. And here you can see where I took went from the pictorial to the symbolic notation, again, using brackets. And then other students, you can see here, this student said, well, I saw them as groups of 6 and I saw 4 groups of 6. So 3 and 3 in one corner. And so I was trying to draw to show how she was thinking about that particular image. So again, some more ideas, and these ones are directly from the website in terms of recording. This was done on a smart board where you can clone the image, but again, you can just copy it onto a Google slide or onto a PowerPoint or Keynote slide, and then project that and circle, or you can make multiple photocopies too and put them up on the whiteboard and record. But you can see on the right, the different ways that this teacher has recorded, focusing on the number of equal groups to think about that. And then another example here, a chocolate box. So they're not arrays and they're not the same items, but what different ways might a child subitize or decompose those quantities to make sense of how many are in there? And you can see the teacher has put the child's name beside each of the strategies and drawn the picture multiple times and then labeled them with the strategies that they used to think about the quantity. And there's more examples on the Number Talk Images website as well. And another example, Steve Wyborny, who we know from Splat, made this suggestion on the website too, that you photocopy, the image multiple times and give it to students with a partner and have them actually circle on the paper to think about it together as well. And you can see here, making that connection to the symbolic notation from the visual image. And again, that opportunity for students to collaborate and talk it through with someone else. And then, you might bring them back together as a whole group and ask them to share their most unique way that they saw the dots and record some of those on the whiteboard for others to see and compare to what they did. So in terms of connections to our curriculum here in British Columbia, you can see on the left, so many curricular competencies being developed, visualizing and communicating using math vocabulary and language, and all that reasoning and logic that we use in mathematics. And then again, the content is really focusing on number concepts and operations, and it really depends what grade level learning standards you're looking at, but you can see how that could be developed across the grades. For intermediate into grade 8, you could be in grade 8 and 9, you could be focusing more on ratios or percentages or fractions, etc., as a way to express the quantity. And then this was in a kindergarten and grade 1 class where after we had done some Number Talk images and students knew that routine, I invited them to create their own images. So they used materials from around their classroom. And in this class, we just put a white piece of paper down, just sort of as a background to keep the materials contained. And the students created different images. And then you can see on the right, this student circled on her paper, and she kept moving her gems and was circling different ways that she saw the 9 gems. And other students found, they were collecting a variety of materials. And that was something interesting that came up, that it was much harder to visualize the quantity when you had different sizes and types of materials. But they learned that through the process of creating their own. And so I didn't say just use one kind of material. That was part of the investigation of creating a successful Number Talk image. And then here, this is from the grade 4 and 5 class. You can see the greater quantity in the collections that are represented in these images. And again, starting with an array and then having some missing parts so that you could start with the larger quantity or multiplication and then subtract, or you could see arrays within that array. And this student was getting quite frustrated in terms of how they were organizing their rocks. And so I suggested that they go back to creating a full array first to make sure that they had all their columns and rows lined up. So creating a 5 by 7 array and then taking some of the parts out, the rocks out of that so that they could create the image that they actually wanted to share with each other. And so the teacher now has a collection of these that they can post, and they're using the students' Number Talk images for their math talks. We do have these instructional routines posters for Number Talk images on the portal and on the district blog in English and en français, with thanks to Carrie Bourne for doing the translation. And those could be, printed on your color printers and put up in your classroom, or when we have families back in the school again, in your foyer, to get them thinking about math and talking about math in some new ways. So you could change out the image as well, do an image of the month. and do something like that on a bulletin board in your school. Lots of ideas for using those posters in different ways. So as we come to the end of this session, I would just like to toss this over to you and think about how will you use this high yield instructional routine with your students.